Yo, what's up, everyone? Good morning. Um, Welcome back, and I'm happy you're here. We're on week 5, and I'll make sure to say this to everyone. But do you guys know we don't we don't have school next week? Um, Hopefully, that's like one of the best parts of the district. Um, that we get all this time off. But yeah, okay. So we have no school next week, and we kind of crushed this unit, right? We just took a quest on sequences, and we're going to move on to our next unit after the break. But this week, because we have a week and I don't want to kind of start the new stuff, we're just going to do stuff that's fun. We're going to talk about applications to this. So yeah, there are word problems, but I think they're kind of enjoyable. We're going to do stuff related to finance this week, and then or today, and then on Wednesday we're going to talk about population growth, stuff like that. So everything we do this week, I'm not even going to quiz you on. It's just kind of to see why we're doing this math, what's a cool application of it, and then we're going to move on. So you don't have to be responsible for learning everything about loans and interest rates today. I'm more interested in you just kind of getting a feel for it to start, right? Because this is a cool topic, and if you're interested in finance, if you were paying attention to the stonks, you're gonna enjoy this because finance has been a big topic recently. And it's kind of cool. So yeah, we're going to talk about loans essentially. So for example, problem 1, it says imagine you are a bank and someone is asking for a $10,000 loan. If the interest rate is 5%, how much money will the person owe in 10 years? So the question is, you're taking out a loan, and hopefully you know that if you take out money or you loan from a bank or loan from, I guess, a friend or whatever, you have to pay interest on that loan. Meaning that if you take $10,000 now, you're going to need to give the bank more than that in a few years. And that's just to make it fair, right? If there wasn't an interest rate, if you didn't have to pay more in the future, everyone would loan a bunch of money all the time, right? So this is how they make sure that you're only taking out the money if you think that you're going to do something good with it. So we're going to say that this $10,000 is the initial amount. And it says the interest rate is 5%. Now, what interest rate means is that if you gave them $10,000, every single year, you're going to have to pay 5% of that value. Okay, so 5% means that you're going to have to give them $10,000 next year plus 5% of that. Okay, so let's do a little calculator work to understand this. We know, let me actually write this first. We know the interest rate is 5%, but we're going to make that 0.05, the decimal, for this. So if you see 5%, remember that stands for the decimal 0.05. Because if you do 10,000 now, think that that's how much money the loan was. But next year, you're going to owe them $500. Okay, so you multiply the interest rate by the initial amount, and that's going to tell you how much money you owe next year, right? So next year, you're not going to owe 10,000. You're actually going to owe 10,500. And I hope that makes sense. What's more important, though, is exactly what to multiply. So our interest rate here is 0.05. But if we do 10,000 now times 1.05, that's going to tell us not only that the interest was 500, but we still have to pay the initial amount. Okay, so what you're always going to do with these interest rates is you're going to do 1 plus them. So if the interest rate was 0.05, think that you're going to owe them 1.05 times your money next year. I hope that makes sense, right? So every single year, you're going to take the amount of money you owe, and you're going to multiply it by 1.05, the initial amount plus now the interest. And that number is going to steadily go up, and it's a sequence. And I hope that makes sense. So if you do this, this represents every year. So let's say you start at 10,000, like we did. that would be the first year you have 10,000. The second year it's you owe 10,500. Crap. I'll do your answer. That's going to be year 3, year 4, year 5, year 6. Okay? So that's how this is going to work. And all I want you to see is that we're going to put this into the exact same equation that we did before. Any year of my equation we can solve for with the initial investment. Wait, let me write the equation. Just like before, right? U1 on the outside, R on the inside, and then N minus 1, right? For a geometric sequence. If we want to find how much money we owe at any year, so in the 10th year, we're going to use this equation where the initial investment was 10,000. The interest rate was 0.05, but that means that our number is going to increase by 1.05 every single year, right? So I could even write those numbers. This is even what it asks you. But this is the sequence. And this sequence is saying how much money is owed after each year, right? The first year, the second year, the third year, etc. So we have our equation. And if I just want to figure out how much money I have on the 10th year, or in this case, how much money the bank will have, I'm just going to plug 10 into my equation. Okay. The first year, it's 10,000, which would be 1 minus 1. So 0, 1.05 to the 0 would cancel this out. But if we put 10 here, so 10 minus 1, 1.05 to the 9th power, and we multiply that to 10,000, that's going to tell us what happens in the 10th year. So if this was a 10-year loan and it was 5%, that means that like in 2020, you would get $10,000 from the bank, but then in 2030, you would owe the bank $15,000. Okay? So I think that that's really cool, and I hope you find that really cool as well. Using the exact same equation we've been doing this entire time, as long as we put in our initial investment and our interest rate, we can find how much money we're owed anytime in the future. And we can flip this, right? So for 2, it says, imagine you have $500. You want to put it into the bank to start receiving interest, and the interest rate is 2%. So another thing to know, right, and something probably adults tell you all the time, but you're like, I don't even have money to begin with, is that if you put money into the bank, you get more money from the bank in the future because the bank is going to use your money for other stuff, right? So if you put $500 in the bank this year and the interest rate is 2%, that means every single year your investment is going to go up by 0.02. So if you put in 500 this year, next year you'd have 510, and you could keep going, right? So if you're the bank, this is really good for you to give a loan because you're going to get more money in the future. But if you're an individual, like if this is you want to put your money in the bank or in stonks or whatever to have a high interest rate or a high rate of return, right? You want the money you put in initially to go up by the highest percent possible. And the bank is like the safest way to do this. So if it says create an equation for how much money you will have in the bank in N years, all we're going to do is talk about the initial amount, which was 500, the interest, which was 0.02, and we're going to put those into the equation. Remember, UN stands for any term in the sequence. So N depends on how many years we're talking about, right? This is how much money you're owed from the bank now using this interest. And I hope that this is making sense. I think it's not too difficult, especially because it really combines the old stuff. And I think hopefully you find money stuff kind of fascinating. So this is our equation. And all we have to do to find out how much money we're going to have in the bank in 3 years is plug 3 into this. That'll say 3, and then it'll say 10. So 500, 1.02, 3 minus 1. 500, 1.02 squared. So 1.02 squared times 500. So in 3 years, I'd have $520, which isn't a lot more than the initial amount, but think that we just have a low interest rate here. And then we can do the exact same thing for 10 years, right? Instead of plugging in 3, we're going to plug in 10. And hopefully you can visualize this sequence, right? If you put your money in the bank, it's steadily going to go up with time. You just can't touch it. So for this one, I'm getting 597.55 cents. So in this case, you wouldn't make that much money in 10 years. You'd only get like $100 more. But think that you only started with 500, so that's not even that bad. Again, the big idea is figure out what is the initial investment, and this is going to tell you how much you're increasing, the rate of increase, which comes from the interest rate. Let's tackle 2 more. This one is going to be the hardest one, and then the last one should be easy, and I'll set you on your way. It says, imagine you owe the bank $1,200 after taking out a loan 5 years ago. If the interest rate is 4%, what was the initial loan amount? So we did sequence questions like this before, but think that this 1,200 is not the initial amount. We don't know the initial amount. And if we don't know the initial amount, we just have to see what we can put into this equation first. And it's going to be stuff we used to do too. So the initial amount we'll say is X. We don't know what that is quite yet. But the interest rate here is 0.04. And we know that we want to fill in this equation. So again, remember that if you need to fill out the equation, you're either going to be given the initial amount and the R, or you're going to be told some amount and some years, right? So it's saying that in the 5th year, if you put N5 here, this is going to become 1,200, right? We don't know what the initial amount is, but we know that some number multiplied by 1.04 to the 4th power is going to give me 1,200. So this is a case of filling out everything you can before you start. We know that we don't know the initial investment, but we know that R is 1.04, and it's the 5th year. So it's 5 minus 1, so to the 4th power. And hopefully you visualize this now. We're just going to do this, 1.04 to the 4th power. And then I'm just going to move this 1.17 to the other side. It's saying that this number is going to be multiplied by 1.17 to get to this number. So now we're just going to do the reverse, just like some good old Algebra 1. And that's going to be 1225. So here you could check your work, right? What this is really saying is that if you put $1,025 in the bank, and you're going to gain 17% overall, it's going to give you 1,200. So here, just be aware that you might have to work backwards for like one of the questions, but I don't think that's too difficult. Okay, excellent. This actually went better than expected. I've never taught this, and I'm as excited to teach it. We're going to do one more question, and this one is really straightforward. This is how the practice problems will start. And again, remember that you're not even being quizzed on, damn. But yeah, just remember you're not even being quizzed on this. I just kind of want to show you some cool stuff. So for example problem 4, it just says, calculate the amount of money a person will owe if they take the following loan. So we have the information, and we don't even need to write it out. We can just put it into the equation. The initial amount was $100,000. The interest rate was 6%. So this is the equation. But if we're trying to figure out what happens in 20 years, all I'm going to do is put 20 in for n minus 1, right? So it's going to be 1.06 to the 19th power. So again, so much of math looks really intimidating, but then it's just a formula, something that you can repeat. And 6% is a decently high interest rate, so we'll see how big this number gets. Yeah, so this is going to become 3.02. So the final answer I'm getting, and I'm sorry, I just did it on the calculator, but hopefully the setup is enough for you. But that's how much you'd owe in 20 years. So what's cool, and we can just kind of finish with this thought, is that just like in a geometric sequence, if you have a large value, right, like if it's 20 years, if the sequence is 50 numbers long, 100 numbers long, that's going to mean that your value is going to go up by a lot. So when we're doing those first few questions, like this one, for example, think that your $500 didn't even go very far in even 10 years with this interest rate of 2%. But if you have a much bigger interest rate, so 6% is a really big interest rate, and you're doing it over a long period of time, that's how you really make a lot of money. So in this case, you would take out $100,000 from the bank, and you'd have to give them $300,000 in 20 years. Alrighty, so I hope that was good. Happy week before break, and I appreciate you.